You may say, what do you mean most goes to the lawyers? The plaintiff's attorneys only take 30 or 40%. But if you add in the defense lawyer costs and the court costs, up to 70% of the money goes to the process. This is a disgusting way to compensate people. Despite the costs of all this, and they're horrendous, it costs you about $500 more to buy a car because to pay for the lawsuits. And worse, the lawyers attack the people we need most, the people who stand on the edge of life and death, drug makers, medical device makers. A heart pacemaker costs $2,000 more to pay for lawsuits. But even worse than the cost, again, it's all the good stuff we don't get to have. It's the government regulation that stops the new drug. Now lawsuits are doing that. I want there to be a lot of companies making vaccines. Nothing has saved lives in America like vaccines. And in an age of bioweapons coming, or bird flu, West Nile virus, anthrax, who knows what the next danger is. The more good vaccines we have, the safer we are. But we used to have 25 companies making vaccines in America. Now we have 5. Why? Well, one reason is that the lawyers started suing, saying this vaccine could have been better. Are we safer with 5 vaccine makers rather than 25? No, we're much less safe. But the lawyers are richer. Likewise, John Edwards, former vice presidential candidate, he got rich. He won't say how rich, $40 to $80 million are the estimates, from these kinds of personal injury suits. And many of them were medical cases. Most of those were cerebral palsy cases. He said the baby was born with cerebral palsy because the evil doctor wouldn't do a cesarean section. The baby was starved for oxygen. If they'd only done a C-section, the baby would be okay. And he was really good at it. He in one case, he channeled the baby. He told the jury, I hear her now. She's saying, let me out, let me out. And the doctor wouldn't do it. The jury awarded $4 million. So it was a theory. It was possible that that was causing the cerebral palsy cases. But since those suits, doctors got scared. They said, whenever in doubt, I better cover my rear. I'm going to do a cesarean section. And the rate of C-sections in America has increased from 6% of all births to 29% of all births. Now, some of it is because the operation's improved. Some women even schedule it for convenience. But most of it is because doctors are doing it to try to protect themselves from the lawyers. Has the rate of cerebral palsy decreased? Not one bit. He was wrong. And what does he do to America for that? Well, the C-section's a much harder operation. Longer hospital stay, 4 times as likely to kill the woman, bigger scar, more pain, more expense. Is Edwards given the money back? No. They even interfere with the information flow that helps the free people protect themselves. As an example, when a company fires somebody because they're reckless or lazy, and somebody calls up and says, I want to hire Fred. What do you say about him? They don't say, well, we let him go because he was lazy or reckless. No, you say, we agreed to part company. Because that's what your personnel department tells you to do, because otherwise you could be sued. Safer not to talk. When Delta fires a pilot because he's a drunk, they don't tell American. This doesn't make us safer. This makes us less safe. Even the most intimate daily engagement has been poisoned by the lawyers. Warning labels. You ought to read them. You ought to read it on the microwave popcorn that says, don't open it like this, you can be burned. But who reads labels anymore? Because they smear them everywhere on everything. There are 41 warnings on stepladders now. Don't dance on it wearing wet shoes or something like that. The result is that we're less safe because we don't read them. We ought to read drug labels. You ought to read the label on the antibiotic tetracycline that says, don't take it with milk. Won't work if you do. But who reads drug inserts? Have you ever looked at a birth control pill insert? I happen to have one here. This thing, tiny fine print, both sides of the page. And how does this make us safer? It makes us less safe because even the doctor doesn't read it. And if you did read it, you wouldn't want the pill anymore. My point is that what I've learned through consumer reporting is that the lawyers can't protect us, government can't protect us half as well as open competition. Again, when I say this, people say, well, maybe that would work for us, we're educated. But what about the poor, the ignorant? You got to have these rules to protect them. But here, too, competition works in surprising ways. As an example, consider cars. Do you understand what makes one car safer than another or run better than another? I don't. And yet it's hard to get really ripped off buying a car in New York. I mean, compare the worst you can buy here and compare that with the best the planned economies could produce. And that was the Trabant. Remember it? The pride of the Eastern Bloc, the East German car. This was a terrible car. You had to put the oil and gas in separately and shake the car for the car to run. And yet this and the Yugo were the best they could do. And they were proud of it. And yet when the Berlin Wall fell, the Trabant disappeared. So why? Why could their best not compete with our mediocre? Because not everybody has to be an expert for the free market to work. You just need a few car buffs, a few people who read the car magazines, and word of mouth spreads. The good companies thrive. Bad ones atrophy. The freedom will protect the ignorant too. This system performs miracles we don't even think about all the time. We don't think about how amazing it is that you can go to a foreign country, stick a piece of plastic in the wall, and cash will come out. And you can give that piece of plastic to a total stranger who doesn't even speak English, and he'll rent you a car for a week. And when you get home, Visa or MasterCard will have the accounting correct to the penny. But the government can't even count the votes accurately. And yet people think government can do it better. Now, I'm not saying market competition will take care of everything. We need government. The worst places in the world to live are the places that don't have enough government. They don't have rule of law, personal security. The African country where you're afraid to build a factory because your neighbor may steal what you make, or the dictator may take the whole factory. So we need government to protect our property and our persons, to keep us safe, to pass some pollution rules, to do some essential functions. I mean, this was the genius of the founders. This is the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Together, it's this thin. I mean, this is what made America successful. Now we have 55,000 pages of tax code and its explanations alone. I mean, how much government should we have? We seldom think in those terms, and John McCain sometimes talks about shrinking it. The Democrats want to make it bigger. What size should it be? 5% of the economy? 10%? We don't think in those terms, but I think we should. Here's a graph of growth in federal spending in America since the beginning of the Republic. And what's remarkable to me about this is you see that for most of the history of the country, and when we grew the fastest, government was less than 5% of GDP. It's only since Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society that the line starts going straight up after World War II. And here it is adjusted for population growth. It still goes straight up. And this is why the promises the politicians make now are just a lie. The idea that Medicare will cover my age group when we're all old is just impossible, the rate they're making promises. And yet they don't stop. They keep promising to cover more, to protect us from every possible injury. They even cover rich people who take stupid risks, like, say, building a house on the edge of an ocean. I did that. That's me up there when I was younger. My father said when I did this, and I borrowed money from my friends, we were renting in the Hamptons, and I thought, hey, I'll take the mortgage out and collect from them and get some equity. He said, are you nuts? It's on the edge of an ocean. It's on sand. That's too risky. But I was able to say, well, maybe, Dad, but the architect says I can't lose because there's something called federal flood insurance.